The extras in LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga are basically like cheat codes. Wanna become invincible? You can do that. Wanna give every character a mustache? You can do that as well. And unlike cheats in most other games, here you can just purchase them in the cantina. But not all extras are immediately available upon beginning a new save file, and once you do unlock them, you can activate and deactivate them whenever you want. So what if you could get your hands on every single extra right at the start of the game, and then kept all of them activated for the entire duration of the playthrough? Can you beat LEGO Star Wars with all extras activated? Now, the way you usually unlock these extras is by collecting red power bricks hidden throughout the game. In every main level, you can find exactly one of these, which will in turn make one of the extras available for you to purchase. This means that if you wanted to grab every single one, you'd have to play through all levels in the game. But there is actually another way to get a hold of them. Extras are already kind of like cheats in spirit, but LEGO Star Wars also lets you use literal cheat codes for a single purpose: to unlock things like the extras way earlier than originally intended. So with a list of cheat codes at hand, I started a new game and typed each of them in one by one for the next 15 minutes. There were actually a few extras unlocked and ready to be purchased already, so I couldn't find any codes for those, which meant that I had to collect the necessary studs in order to get them. There's not that much money to be made around the cantina, but thankfully the cheat codes I had used gave me their extras right away, without me having to spend any money. So I activated them, and among many other things, I received a ridiculously large stud multiplier that drastically increased the amount of money I got. For every 1000 studs I collected, I would now get over 3.8 million instead. And since I already had enough cash to purchase every single slave on Tatooine, I grabbed the remaining extras and finally started the challenge. I probably don't need to tell you that this cutscene isn't normal, but don't worry, none of them will be. As you can see, one of the extras has turned everyone completely black. From Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, to the Separatist droids, to Watto and the pod racers, to Darth Vader, well, he was pretty dark before that already, the Rancor in Jabba's palace, and also Jabba himself. Everyone in the game was black. Well, almost everyone in the game. The effects of all of these extras ranged far beyond cosmetics though. Jedi are pretty powerful even under normal circumstances, but their ground pound specifically was now so powerful that it could take out a shielded droideka with a single hit. In each and every level that I entered, it took me an estimated nanosecond to attain the status of true Jedi, for which you'd normally have to make quite the effort of collecting enough studs to fill up the meter. As crazy as that sounds, a single stud was sometimes already enough for me. Before I go any further, let me just quickly turn off the silhouettes. I know I said I tried to beat the game with every extra, but I just have to make an exception for this one. It looks so much nicer this way, wouldn't you agree? I promise you, this is the only extra I will ever deactivate, and it has no impact on the gameplay whatsoever. And as I'm sure you've noticed, everyone has a mustache now. I like that. The blaster characters got some very nice improvements. Their blaster bolts could now explode, which was especially crazy considering that they could even destroy the metal objects for which you'd normally need the bounty hunter bombs. And on top of that, according to my sources, they now dealt double the damage both with their shots and with their slaps. Although since most enemies in this game die in one hit even without the extras, I didn't really notice those changes. Also, their grappling hooks now looked like flowers, which was great. The extras had barely any effect on the pod race itself, but would you be surprised to learn that not only does the boy Anakin have a mustache, but also his pod racer? I'm not kidding, nearly everyone in the entire game was wearing a mustache. It was amazing. With the rare exception of Watto and Sebulba, who did not wear the agreed upon mustaches. Those scumbags. And neither did the entire Gungan army for that matter. It must have been too expensive to supply this many people with a sense of style, which made it even more impressive that this time around, it was the Separatists who chose not to put money over morals. You might have noticed that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's lightsabers were red instead of the usual blue and green. Well, this was on account of the extra dark side, which did have one additional effect. It gave any Jedi the power to interact with dark side objects as well, which is convenient if you want to collect and explore everything, but not terribly useful otherwise. Another thing that surely did not escape your sharp senses is the fact that I could pretty much just walk through swarms of enemies and not worry about them whatsoever. Well, as I alluded to earlier, I was literally invincible to pretty much all forms of damage. It's kind of a thing. The Jedi's force push was replaced by a force pull, which I personally disliked, especially since I couldn't push these battle droids into each other anymore. And speaking of droids, the extra walkie-talkie disable gets the Bountynuma award for most confusing extra in the game. I thought that by having this turned on, the commander droids would be unable to call for reinforcements, but after doing intense research, I figured out that it actually allowed me to disable other droids whenever I was playing as a commander droid. In ship levels, I now had the amazing effect of infinitely respawning torpedoes, among a few other things that I'll talk about later when we get to the original trilogy. Droids in particular got a pretty big glow up in this challenge. R2 units could now actually deal damage by using their stun rays, and they, as well as all other droids in the game, now had the ability to self-destruct, resulting in a big explosion that could also hurt enemies. Gong's droid, the Legend, undoubtedly benefited from this challenge the most out of any character, because on top of the self-destruct, he got upgraded from this to this. More than anything else, I appreciated the quality of life extras. Building faster and using the force faster were freaking bangers, and I don't think I ever want to play this game without them anymore. The mini-kit detector is an absolute no-brainer for anyone that wants to do the 100% in this game, although it pretty much just painted a bunch of arrows on the screen for me since I wasn't planning on collecting anything unless it was literally right in front of my eyes. Just like the pod race, gunship cavalry was not impacted very strongly by the extras, except for the fact that my gunship somehow seemed much manlier this time around, and the ground bombs looked like small little Death Stars. Similarly to blasters, the lightsabers also had their damage doubled, but sadly these damage increases did not seem to apply to any of the boss fights. Battle over Coruscant was another level that remained largely the same, with the exception of me still being invincible and continuing to make massive bank. As you can probably guess by now, playing through LEGO Star Wars with all extras activated was anything but difficult. That being said, there was actually a single level that threatened to destroy my entire run, and that was the General Grievous fight in episode 3. In this level you have to play as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Commander Cody, switching a couple of times between fighting Grievous using Obi-Wan and encouraging him to go back to the platform with Cody. But since Cody was a clone trooper, he got his gun replaced with a carrot. This meant that I couldn't shoot the explosive barrels next to Grievous whenever he jumped away from the platform, so I had to find a way to somehow take care of it using Obi-Wan. In the first phase of the fight, General Grievous jumped to a small secluded cliff opposite the main platform. It was clearly too far away for me to jump there, but I tried it a few times anyways, and at some point one of the bombs just exploded for no reason whatsoever. I was actually able to replicate this maneuver on the other one, pushing Grievous back onto the arena and allowing me to keep going. There were 2 or 3 more situations like this, and even though I initially felt discouraged on every single one, I eventually managed to use the same strategy over and over again until I finished Grievous off for good. I considered that one of the extras might have had something to do with that, but when I tried it again with all of them disabled, it still worked. The explosive barrels will just blow up if you get close enough to them. The extra force grapple leap was an absolute goat in this level specifically, because it allowed me to reach places with Obi-Wan that only blaster guys could usually access, and no joke, it probably saved the entire run because of that. Order 66 looked just a teeny tiny bit less menacing this time around. The extra that disarms stormtroopers is easily one of my favorite ones in the game. The original trilogy in particular was so fun to play because almost every enemy I encountered was trying to stab me with a carrot. I realized that I haven't talked that much about the spaceship levels, and that's because they appeared much more frequently after episode 3. There were many useful extras that made these levels a blast to go through, and after trying to finish them without taking damage only a few months ago, this time I thoroughly enjoyed just gliding along and taking in the scenery. As I've mentioned earlier, I had infinite torpedoes and I was obviously still invincible. There was also a tractor beam which activated itself whenever an enemy came too close to me, and which is the same one that you get temporarily by picking up a power orb. This beam immobilizes any enemy ships that get too close to you, and it was seriously so nice to have that. I was continuing to rack up some serious cash, so out of curiosity, I tried to calculate the amount amount of studs I'd need to purchase everything in the entire game, including all of the characters and extras that I had already unlocked, and unless I made some wild error in summing up all of the items, I concluded that it costs no more than like 40 million studs to get all of it. For reference, I had already left the very first level with more than double that amount of money. So yeah, those extras were going crazy. It's safe to say that none of the remaining story levels posed any threat to my challenge. They were all very easy and very fun to play through. There were also a lot of magnificent mustaches to be seen. I liked the super battle droids a lot. Jabba, the slime ball, of course did not wear a mustache, and sadly neither did his Rancor, but the Banthas sported a pretty large set of whiskers. The Jawas didn't look so bad either, and I personally found the X-Wing fighter especially funny. Hell, even AT-STs and AT-ATs wore mustaches. This extra was so goofy, it was the highlight of the entire challenge for me. Sometime in episode 5, I reached the maximum amount of studs, which was 4 billion, and therefore about 100 times more than what you'd need to purchase everything in the game. At some point while I was walking around the Death Star, I had collected so many stormtroopers that my game crashed. At least I think it was because of that. It was the only time this happened anyways. Interestingly, even the Emperor's royal guards were sporting carrots, and they were also the only ones smart enough to actually beat me up with them. Now here's one last thing to talk about, and that is all of the bonus levels, including the challenges and the bounty hunter missions. Did the extras have any effect on those? Well, the first 4 levels of the bonus episode were treated just like the normal ones in this regard, as all of the extras worked just fine there. All extras relating to money were deactivated in levels 5 and 6 of the bonus episode, however, for obvious reasons. And the same was true for the episode and mini-kit bonus levels, in which you also have to collect 1 million studs. That being said, the rest of the extras remained active in all of these levels, including the exploding blaster shots and the invincibility, which obviously made them a hell of a lot easier. But in the bounty hunter missions, I was entirely on my own as every single extra was disabled, including the fake mustaches. The same was also true for the super story mode, where you have to speedrun back to back through every level in a given episode, and the challenges, where you have to collect a number of mini-kits as fast as possible. Extras not being a thing in the bounty hunter mission specifically was a bit of a bummer to me, because there were 2 extras that had been tailor-made for the bounty hunters. One of them made my bombs explode in a bigger radius, while the other gave me the ability to shoot off rockets whenever I played as either Django or Boba Fett. Either way, there were a lot of extras that did not have any impact on my run at all, because they were either so niche that I never even got to see their effects, or just not very useful for my purposes, such as the one that gave me the ability to honk when driving around in certain vehicles. I honestly didn't even know this was a feature tied to the extras. I thought you could just always do that. Some extras in their turn got entirely overshadowed by others. Regenerate hearts and perfect deflect would have come in handy if they hadn't been completely demolished by invincibility. Many of the stud boosting extras were pretty useless since the multipliers were so powerful, and the extra that doubled my lightsaber damage should have turned them purple as well, but the dark side was too strong in this case. Also, I have one last bonus fact for you that I found out while researching some of the extras just now. Did you know that extra toggle lets you play as characters that you normally can't play as? There are surprisingly many of them too. You can play as a skeleton, as a number of different droids, as Han Solo frozen in carbonite, as a Womp Rat and a Wampa, and if you're feeling mighty adventurous, even the Rancor himself. How the hell did I only find out about this now? Each of them can only be played in certain levels, however, and only when having the extra activated and then selecting free play. Here's the full list of characters. I did not check if all of these appearances are accurate, but I think they probably are. In any case, there is no denying that we have completed all 6 episodes of LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga with every extra activated. Well, except for silhouettes, but let's just not talk about that one. This was without a doubt one of the easiest challenge runs I'll ever do, so I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider taking a look at my Patreon so that I can keep making videos, and check out that no damage run I mentioned earlier if you haven't already. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.